Well, at the outside, I must thank all of you for first finishing in time, and second, for excellent presentations, and they're really informative and come from. It's very interesting to see the way each presentation comes from different domain of AI, and obviously it is you are looking at AI generative, the next generation of AI applications. But you also there are these examples that showcase how AI could be applied to improve outcomes at the community level, and particularly on the governance aspects, as Mr. Prasoon as well as Tanvi. But they also sort of point out at these challenges about data and infrastructure. And that is what actually bothered me when I saw this title about AI for water, climate, and health. Because, given the way that we are here, the next level of, next milestone for AI is the AI generative systems. To look at it, I think would these AI generative systems are really what they are promised to be for sectors like water, health, and climate? Are they really, is the question. Because, if you look at the way this AI generative works, it's basically, you've got these algorithms set, the DNNs, deep neural networks. What they need to do, and mostly I think, is to a large extent is training these algorithms, these neural networks. That requires a lot of data. And what is the status of data in these sectors? You all know. Yesterday's presentations have showcased how we are positioned with respect to health responses, and then partly today on water. But the applications like Mr. Prasoon has presented are the kind of applications that we're looking for to improve the efficiency and also productivity. And the kind of questions that Mr. Tiwari raised about how do you apply for a diverse ecosystem like Himalayas, that's where it makes us to ponder how far can we go with it. So if you look at it, there are these, I think we need to be prepared for the moment of AI generative systems. That's the best, I guess, we can do. And in order to do that, the same challenges like infrastructure, data, and what kind of data that we offer for these neural networks to train themselves is the challenge. So at least to the extent that I have seen, there are these serious structural problems, particularly with respect to infrastructure, and not only for water augmentation, but also in terms of gathering data. If you look at any flood instance that has happened in the past several decades, post-mortem analysis actually tells you that we don't have the right kind of density or coverage of the systems like gauges, rain gauges, to model these possible incidences or the flood occurrences. That's not something that we don't know. Yet, if you look at the kind of investments that we are making in this infrastructure, like rain gauges and other, to collect the data, you know about it, and that's unfortunately is an area that we have not been investing, and I think that's a priority area to invest in to get the best out of the AI generator systems. Besides that, I think if you look at, there are also certain kind of limitations. As I said initially, when I started off by saying that AI, we are cautiously optimistic, but then there are also certain limitations with respect to how much can we really benefit from these AI generative systems. Particularly, does it really accommodate the kind of diversity and dynamism that you see in these ecosystems? Do we have the means of capturing it to feed into the AI generative systems? These are the questions that we need to think about. And if I look at it, and if you want to take an analogy of the the technologies and institutions analogy that I mentioned about to bring in these sustainable resource ecosystems. As I said, you know how, at least to the extent possible, you know how for a sector like water, how it behaves in terms of technological understanding about how water behaves. But the data feeding comes from the communities, the kind of social changes, the kind of political dynamics that you see. Can we feed it into these AI systems? That's the kind of question that comes into to really whether we can exaggerate the potential of AI generative systems to support it. So at least my way of looking at it is to focus on the fundamentals, and particularly investing in infrastructure and data gathering systems to look at applications, the kind of applications that you have demonstrated. There is also this challenge, much more at the governance level. The sectors that we talked about, particularly water and health, they are fundamentally state subjects. And if you look at it, the constitutional scheme and the executive power largely is concentrated with the states. So what we need to start looking at is to strengthen the subnational governance mechanisms. I think the next level of priority is to invest in the subnational institutional strengthening and governance mechanisms, because that's where the executive power is concentrated, and eventually the fulcrum of change is going to be at the subnational scale. So that's the second lesson I would think is the important one. The third one, again, very cautiously optimistic. The reason why I say it is because if you look at the horror stories, the way AI is being used by these various kinds of elements, like, including even the big tech very often, the kind of stories that we heard about deep fakes, and we need to be prepared for these kind of risks. Now that we assume that it is quite remote, and people who do it really far off are the ones with this kind of intent that they use it for suboptimal outcomes. But it is also true closely, in the sense, like, see, if you look at, there are two sides to this coin. When you are looking at data gathering investments, there is always this tendency to believe that we can open source these data and other kind of and information, and we can contribute to these systems. One thing that we should realize by this time is that it's not just the knowledge production, but also these days both producing data and information is actually a political project. It always driven by certain interests, what kind of data and information you produce. And there are these, I always say this, that when you want to talk about integrity of data that you could use for the right kind of applications, the challenge is to ensure that this data and information is accompanied by three elements. One is credibility, second is legitimacy, and third is accountability. You have to make sure that this infrastructural investments that we are putting in and the procedures of production of this data and information, do they have the credibility that could be used for the governance outcomes that we are looking at? Do they have the legitimacy to produce? And do they have the accountability? Can we make these producers of the data accountable? When it comes to that point, even the community interests that are with all good intentions, when they produce with certain kind of interest, they fail in these matters. And we need to be cautious about it, what kind of data that goes into these AI systems. And that is the bigger challenge right now when it comes to. So I think there are ways of, working with both state as well as non-state actors. And we need to bring in the kind of these elements to be cautious about how this data and information that would be produced for the AI systems. Having said that, having given you several warnings about how we should be looking at this technological advances in artificial intelligence, I just wanted to close it on a more optimistic note. you know, I always felt whenever you see there is a resource degradation that is happening, whether it is water, I mean, particularly the sources, rivers, and or other resources in particularly vulnerable environments like Himalayas. I always thought that it is because of the deterioration of the community institutions, and that deterioration of the community institutions are happening because people are increasingly moving remote to the resource. So, you know, for instance, in Delhi, I'm there, and then I don't actually know where my water comes from. So when I don't know what is the source, how do I think about protecting that source? How do I build certain kind of, affinity towards it, or otherwise responsibility towards this resource? What I see, and I see that, you know, I always thought that this trajectory is going further and further remote to the resources, which is having adverse impact on the community institutions. But AI is something that is going to bring you closer to the resource. I mean, it is the powerful technology that it has is that you have the capacity to look at or have the access to the kind of information that we need to tell where the resource use that the consumption of yours is coming from. Where is the source? And what kind of changes are happening? What are the kind of responsibilities? How can you contribute? How can you yourself feel accountable to it? So I think that remoteness away from the resource is likely to reduce because of the AI. And I think we have this opportunity to rebuild these institutions that we keep saying that they are deteriorating over time. So I guess with that note, we are just at 10 o'clock, and I think we have done well to complete it. And if there is if the organizers think that there is other parts, like we conclude now, right? So it's time to conclude, and I would like to thank again the presenters, speakers today, including Professor Jayaraman, who is now invisible. Thank you once again, and thank you once again for having me.